Hey, it's Lindsey from Two Main Friends in a Podcast. We're kicking off with our first giveaway. To enter, comment favorite on the episode you enjoyed most on Spotify or text us on Apple Podcasts. We can't wait to hear what you love. We are doing our first Zoom recording. Usually we're in person, but it is a snow day here where we are.
It sure is. There is so much snow.
I love it. Winter has been pretty mild with snow, so it's nice to have cold weather and snow at the same time.
Yeah, and it's really pretty. I like the first couple of snowstorms when everything's like blanketed in a white, pristine looking, glittery snowstorm. And then after that, I mean, and I will say it's also better than looking at everything being brown.
I agree. Yeah, it's just nice. I also like it because on days like today, I get to work remote. So I'm home and it just feels good. Like mid-afternoon today, I had a little break in between some meetings. So I jumped on my walking pad. I did 25 minutes. I was able to turn on a show and kind of walk it out during the show. And there's just something so refreshing for the brain when you get to just pause what you're doing and do something active and physical and separate yourself from the workday.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I attempted to use my walking pad today, but I was on it for approximately 3 minutes, and there was a lot happening around me with my boys and timing. And then I would kind of stepped off of it unintentionally. And I was like, we're going to try this later. This is not working at this moment. So maybe later tonight, after everybody kind of winds down, I can hop back on. But
I love it. I have found that having a walking pad has been my newfound favorite because when I am doing something active, whether I love to go to Zumba on Tuesdays, I used to go on Saturdays, but now my schedule just doesn't allow for that. So I can only do one time a week. I have my walking pad at home. And for winter, that's been so perfect because when I'm active, it really helps my mental health as well. And I'm learning that being active and being physically active and mentally active, working on my mental health, go hand in hand together. So when I'm mentally feeling good and physically feeling good, both parts are a good smooth working machine.
yeah, I can agree with that. Around Christmas time, I was starting to feel really gross, I think is the only way I know how to describe it. We had been eating terrible, and it's the holiday season, right? So you've got all the parties and all the things. And so we just weren't making great food choices. And by the end of that 2 week period where it's Christmas and New Year's, I just felt really bloated and gross. And we made some diet changes for January, and I feel so much better. And I'm hopeful that it will be able to help throughout the year. But I noticed a significant change just in how I was viewing things just based on what I was eating. And I also got a walking pad for Christmas. So I've been trying to incorporate that more. And it's made a really big difference in a short amount of time for sure.
I agree. Having a stagnant job, I sit at a desk all day. And so just being able to come home and not sit in front of the TV or sit around and play video games because I love playing on my Switch or on my Super Nintendo. So being able to just be active and keep that activity flowing. 'Cause I probably have said this in previous episodes. Once I'm home, I'm home. When the clock strikes 5, especially in the winter, there's a little bit more freedom in the summertime. But in the winter, when it's cold and the sun has set at 4 p.m., I am rushing from work to get home, put on my comfy clothes, and veg out because I don't want to do anything else.
Oh, 100%. I do the same thing. We were out earlier today, and I was like, I can't wait to get home and put on my comfy clothes. And I've been home since then, and I have not left my house. So
Yes, I love comfy clothes. They're so great. So today's episode is all about mental health, and that's just such a small, taking care of your physical body, being active and eating healthy, doing the things to align with what you want to see yourself mentally feel as well. And I think that they go so hand in hand together. And when I'm physically taking care of myself, I feel more inclined mentally to really focus in on the things that I need to focus in on.
Yeah, mental health such a huge topic to talk about, and I know that it's becoming more prevalent that people talk about it, but there's still so much that is left to be said. And I know for me personally, it's been a new journey that I've been on in the last 2 years, and it's really eye-opening. Like you hear a lot about it, but until you're walking it in the middle of it, you don't really understand the depth of it until you're in the middle of it. And it's been really eye-opening just to see like one, what it feels like to be walking through like a mental health crisis, but two, um, how we can help each other through it, but also the lack of conversation that there is around it as well. And we just wanted to create space to have a conversation about it because I think that the more that we discuss it, hopefully we can start to break down some of those barriers and those walls that we have around the topic because there's so much to be said and learned. And I don't um, mean to be like any sort of expert because I'm not by any means. Like I said, this is a brand new 2 year journey. And I feel like I'm at the very beginning and I don't know everything, but I can tell you from my experience what it's felt like. And it's been a roller coaster for sure. And yeah, so we just wanted to have an opportunity to kind of share our experiences with it, but also give opportunity for us to have a bigger conversation around the topic that has so many nuanced layers.
I agree. And I think that's an important disclaimer. We by no means are professionals. This is just what we've walked through in our lives and what we've learned through life experiences, through conversations with each other, and how we've grown in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lindsay, for you, like when did it start or like do you want to just kind of share some of your experiences?
Yeah, I think that my mental health journey has kind of been a two-parter. Um, in some ways. So in 2014, I really struggled with a deep, deep level of guilt and shame. We had lost my grandmother in June of that year. In April, she had taken a fall and was severely injured, and I was living with her at the time. And then all of the what ifs during that time started to settle in. What if I had gotten to her sooner? What if this? What if that? And there were a lot of question marks. And it actually put this invisible wedge between me and my family because none of them had any of those what ifs or any of those expectations set towards me. But I had all these false expectations or thoughts in my head of what they thought. And so I didn't talk to them for a couple of months after I moved back to Maine. I kind of secluded myself from my family, very vague check ins like, yeah, things are going great. But I didn't get in depth with my mom or with my aunt, who I'm very close with, because I had convinced myself somewhere along the way that they were angry at me for the events of my grandmother passing, even though I had nothing to do with it. But that's just how grief worked for me at that time because I was physically in the house when it happened to her. And so there was just a lot of like torment that was going on in the brain during that season. So that's when I started pursuing a grief counselor at that point and working through those pieces of it. And that was huge because not only was I dealing with the grief of losing somebody who I was very, very close to, but I was also dealing with the grief of like leaving. I had moved back to Maine. I knew that going forward, I wasn't going back to Florida. That wasn't an option anymore. And my home was going to be in Maine. So then it was kind of like transitioning into grieving of leaving behind my home again and leaving behind my family again. And then the stress of trying to find a new job and not finding. And what really led to that was I was staying with a family that I'm very close with. And I hadn't come out of my room for days. I wasn't eating. And she knocked on my door and was like, get dressed. You're going out to see sunshine today. And I was just in a really dark place. And so that's kind of what led me to the grief counseling. And I needed that at that time. Um, Recently, through just stress and life and dealing with life, I've started seeing a counselor again. Um, and she, through a series of tests and practices and conversation, we've talked a lot about OCD tendencies. And that was something I was really embarrassed about. and took a while for me even to talk to you about it, and what I was dealing with that. And it was just little tendencies. Like, did I turn off the curling iron? And I didn't even use the curling iron that day, but I have to go back upstairs now and check and make sure nothing's plugged in, or touching the stove or the oven 3 or 4 times until my brain could catch up with the fact everything is turned off. And again, some days I haven't even used those items, but I know that they're there physically, especially the stove. That's a huge one for me. Making sure all the burners are turned off, or the door is locked is the other one, checking for that. And so being able to work through those and finding out what are the measures, like what causes the brain to do that. And it is on those high stress days. And for me, I'm learning that the days, again, to go back to being physically active, when I'm making conscious efforts to take care of my body and my mind, those feelings are less and less for me, that need to do that on a personal level. So that's kind of been my journey and where I'm at right now, and navigating. And it's not easy every day. There's still most days that I'm checking to make sure the doors are locked, or that the oven is turned off, or whatever that day my mind says I need to do. But we're learning and we're navigating through it.
Yeah, for sure. And so as you're like kind of navigating and learning through some of these things, what have been some ways that people around you or like friends have been helpful through that process?
Yeah. So one of them is sometimes just being on the phone with someone and me being able to verbally say, I shut the door is locked, the stove is turned off, whatever those things are, or having a safe space to text that person and say, hey, the oven's turned off. This is for me for when I am stressed out later, like to look at it, and have somebody be able to like reassure me in those things. And talking about it and not being ashamed that this is what I'm walking through. And it's a totally uncharted territory for myself, and also being very vulnerable and saying, I don't know what I need to make this better, but I just need space to be able to feel what I'm walking through and to be real about it. And having other people create the space for me to be safe to talk about it.
100%. I couldn't agree more about that. I know for me, it's been the last 2 years. I've been battling different bouts of depression. And that was really hard to come to terms with because I didn't really understand it. I've never been in close proximity with someone dealing with depression, so I didn't know what the signs were. I just knew that I went from being able to plan events for large groups of people and write lists and kind of organize things and do my job well to not doing any of that. And it was really hard for me to understand, like, why can't I do these things? Like, I'm a capable human being, right? And I remember in one of like the harder parts of this at the beginning of this season, I told my husband, I said, I feel like I'm trying to do something with one of my arms tied behind my back, and I can only do it with one hand. Like that was the only way I knew how to describe what I was feeling because I couldn't figure out what it was. And there were some really good days and there were some good weeks. And then there were times when it was really hard again. And simple tasks that were an afterthought, 2 or 3 years ago were really overwhelming. And I just didn't understand it. And nor did I know how to talk about it because how do you describe that to somebody, right? Like when you're in the middle of it, it's just, this is really hard. And you also have that like guilt and that shame of, well, it's just a load of laundry. Like, why can't you fold it? And, but when you're struggling with something like depression, folding the basket of laundry can feel daunting and overwhelming and like it's too much. And until you're there, it's hard to understand it. And so it makes, at least for me, it made me not want to share that with the people around me because I didn't know like how they would respond to that. And thankfully, my husband was great through that whole process. And when I was actively still seeing my counselor, and after like several appointments, he finally put a name to it and said, "I think that this is depression, and we should talk about this." Having a name to it was really enlightening. Because now it wasn't this like big thing. There was an identifier, So it kind of helped make it feel less scary. Um, but also still kind of frustrating, right? Because I still feel like I'm doing things with an arm, like one less arm in it. And, so it's been quite a process and a journey in the last 2 years. And again, there's still some really good days and there's some bad days that things are overwhelming or I'm short tempered and irritable because I just don't know how to process like internally, like what's happening. But I'm really grateful that in the midst of it, it's showing me a lot, right? Like I'm not defined by what I do, it's who I am, like those kinds of things that we can get lost in the translation when I'm just kind of keeping up with life.
What are some tools that you found have helped you in the past few months navigate that?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest ones for me, because I am such a doer, was learning to just be okay with what I can do today. So if the laundry doesn't get folded, the house isn't going to fall in on itself, right? Like it, and I don't believe that it's going to be some major memory that will destroy my kid's childhood, right? Because we had baskets of laundry unfolded. Um, but just learning to accept, like, yeah, this is hard in the moment because I'm used to being able to do more, but for today, this is all I can do. And that's enough. And tomorrow we'll try again and see what tomorrow looks like. And so I think just having the grace to accept it has been, it's not an easy thing to accept it because you want to do more and have the capacity to, you know, text a friend back, or go out for dinner. But sometimes you just don't. And being okay with that gives you space to breathe in those moments of like, okay, it's not going to be like this forever. This is just today, and that's okay.
I think a key word that you said there was grace. I think that's a huge part of any journey in mental health. Yours with depression and walking through that and giving yourself the grace that it's okay that the laundry didn't get folded today. It's not the end of the world if that doesn't happen tomorrow either. And then for my, different brain offsets of, did I do this? Did I turn the stove off? Did I do that? For me, I just get frustrated. Like, why can't my brain just accept that it's done and move on? Why do I have to keep going back to it multiple times? But giving yourself grace of, it's okay. Like, hold space for it and move on. And I think when it comes to other people, we would be so quick to give them that same grace. And it's so easy to extend a graceful hand to someone else. And we would want to hear from them what they're going through and how can we help? Can we sit with you through this? And maybe there are no words or no actions that we can take, but I can physically just sit with you while you walk through it, or just know that I'm here and I'm a shoulder to lean on. And those are little acts of grace and acceptance that we can outreach to another person. But I think internally, sometimes it's so hard to present ourselves with that same level of grace and understanding.
100%. And it's hard, I think, because in our context, we come from a Christian background. And in that background, mental health is very stigmatized. And oftentimes you're told, well, you just need to pray more and then it will go away. And I don't know for you, I know for me, that was a huge part of this journey being, I don't know if it's more difficult or less difficult, but it was another challenge because in those dark days when I was doing the bare minimum to get through the day and the rest of the day was sitting on the couch, there were so many times that I didn't even know how to form the right thoughts to know what to pray. And then sitting with, did I do something to deserve this? Is God mad at me? Like, is my faith not strong enough because I've prayed and nothing's happening and I'm still here in this dark state? And where is God in the middle of this? And that's a hard place to be in. And it also makes you not want to share with other people because what if they don't think I've prayed enough, or that it's my fault, or, those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And I think too that you get to a place of exhaustion, right? with it because you're tired of feeling the way that you feel. You don't want to feel that way. And you are trying everything that you can to figure it out. You're analyzing yourself. And I think sometimes, and it's no slight to anyone who says this, because I do believe, like, pray about it, absolutely. But I don't necessarily believe that's the only answer that we can provide to someone is, well, pray about it and God will fix it. Yes, in time, but I also believe that God is going to provide us with the right tools to get
Yes.
us through that season. And if you are somebody who has walked through it before, telling somebody else just pray about it, God will walk you through it. Great, but what were some of the tools that you've used in your life? And I think being more open to talking about the experiences that we've had, if we've walked through those things, especially if you're a person in leadership, like that is so important. And pause and pray with that person. But let's come up with some tools and some ideas. Maybe it's just a breathing technique. For me, I deal with a lot of anxiety on different things, and I love to go to Zumba. That's my one of my favorite things to do on a Tuesday night. However, the act of getting into the building of Zumba is not my favorite thing to do. I feel so great once that 1 hour workout is done and I'm in my car and I'm so thankful I did it. But in order for me to walk through that building, I have to get there 20 minutes early, sit in the parking lot, and convince myself and have a conversation that you'll be so thankful of it. But one of the other tools that my therapist has given me is a tapping technique. So when my thoughts are running rampant of everyone's going to be staring at you, you don't know the dance routines enough, like you're not coordinated enough, you don't have any rhythm, and nobody wants you there, they're making fun of you, like my brain will give you every reason that I should not walk through those doors. And so for me, sometimes it's just taking my hands and placing them on my shoulders or on my kneecaps and just tapping in a rhythm for a couple of minutes to almost like stigmatize my brain into thinking about something else other
Mm,
than walking through those doors and how worried I am about everybody else inside that room, when I know at the end of the day that, first of all, no one's eyes are on me. We're all there to do the same thing. Most of us don't have rhythm, and we're all looking at the instructor to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. But in the moment, those emotions are big and they don't feel right. So doing my tapping exercise distracts the brain, puts the focus somewhere else, calms me down, and then I can walk into the building. But I had to learn those techniques from somewhere because I wasn't coming up with those on my own.
right. And I think that there's a lot to be said about adding prayer, right? I believe that Jesus should be the center focal point of our life, and that life is more hopeful and more peaceful and much better when Jesus is at the center, right? And so I believe that there's power in prayer, and I believe that God can heal. Have I seen him do miracles and people healed miraculously? Yes. So I know that it's possible. But in the moments when it's not happening on this side of heaven, what do you do with that? And I really had to grapple with that and find out for myself, like, so what do I do next? Because and one of the things that I don't remember who said it first, but it was really helpful for me was to just ask Jesus to sit with me where I am, because I can't be any other place than where I am. And right now, I'm sitting in a dark place, but will you come sit with me here? And there have been days where I was sitting on my couch and that's really all I could pray. And I could, like, in the kindness of Jesus, he met with me where I was, not where I wanted to be, not where I was hoping I could be, but in that moment, he met me where I was. And I'm so grateful for that because it showed me the kindness of Jesus. I think sometimes we forget that Jesus isn't looking at us with this like thumb on, like pushing us down, like, how dare, right? Like, how dare you not be able to do this thing? And he's so kind and so faithful that he meets us. And yes, I talk to my therapist and we figure out what's going on. And there are so many different kinds of tools. And I'm thankful that there's people coming around in the Christian circles, like Jenny Allen wrote a book, Get Out of Your Head. And that was great research and really helpful to like help stop spiraling thoughts. And Lisa Turkers is another one. She has a great podcast about Jesus and theology and therapy and incorporating these tools, because it's okay that sometimes we're not okay. And being okay to say that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of faith, honestly, because life isn't always neat and tidy and wrapped up in a bow. But in the midst of that, we can still have faith and have tools. And I think that you're right when you're talking about like learning tools from different techniques from different people, because we need those to make it through these seasons, and giving ourselves grace to learn them and keep Jesus at the center of it and allow him to walk with us through what we're facing. And I'm so thankful. I was reading through Psalms quite a bit when I was walking through a lot of the season. And I've always loved Psalms. It's one of my favorite books of the Bible because I love the emotion that David writes in a lot of his Psalms. And before I've struggled with depression, I would be like, wow, David's like a roller coaster. Like one chapter, he's like, God is the best, and I'm so grateful. And the next chapter, he's like, I'm in a pit of despair, right? And you don't like, but walking through the season of depression, I can see in some of those chapters, it seems like he might have been there too. Like, I am in the pits. I can't, my couch is soaked with tears. Like all of these things are being pulled out, and it's showing me that David struggled in dark moments, but he cried out to God and God met him. And it's okay. You can still bring those feelings, those obstacles to God in prayer, and he can meet you there. You don't have to have it figured out first. And so that's been part of the journey for me, is like how to grapple with my faith and this whole idea of having depression and not being okay all the time. And I'm just thankful that God has been faithful. And somebody has a sweatshirt somewhere that says Jesus and therapy. And I really want that sweatshirt because um, I think that it's true. You can have both. And it's a tension that we live in because we live in a broken world, and it's not going to be figured out until we get to heaven.
One of the things that you said, as you were talking about David, it made me think that there's nothing new under the sun,
Mhm.
that God knows. And he's walked people through it before us, he'll walk people through it after us. And I think that as we grow as people and more research is available, more medical is just growing all the time. There's always new research in the medical field. Like I choose to believe, this is my own personal, that God provides wisdom to those people as well, and to the doctors and to the therapist. And if you're seeking out the right qualifications and the right person, and don't be afraid to break up with your therapist if you have to find the right person, and don't be afraid to break up with your doctor to find the right doctor, because it's so easy just to say, well, I found somebody, I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to stick with this. But find the right people. And I think that God points us in those directions. Like if we're leaning into him and we are praying about it, I think those tools do become natural and come to us, because God wants to see us as our best selves, as the best version of ourselves. So even in those moments, praying, like if you don't feel right about the person you're seeing, see someone else, but
Mhm.
keep seeking what you need, and God will point you right into that path.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it was a year ago that my therapist had brought up the idea of medication. And that was a big deal to me. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Like, that's a big step to take. There's so many risk factors and all of this stuff, right? And so I really dragged my feet on it for a full year. And finally, in the last couple months, I was like, you know what? I'm really not getting better. And I don't like limping along this way. So I'm going to do it. Like, so I reached out to my primary care physician, set up the appointment, and I had been praying. I shared that with somebody that I really trust and said, will you just be praying with me? Like, this is the next step. And so when I got to my doctor's appointment, I had already had a PCP assigned to me, but they left the practice. So I was meeting with a brand new doctor for the first time. And so she comes in and she's like, hey, tell me what's going on. And so sharing with her like what's happening. And it came up that my husband and I work at a church here locally in town. And she was like, okay. And so as I began to share that, she began to share with me how much she loves Jesus and that she believes that God has given us tools to use and that it's okay to have Jesus and medicine sometimes because our brains need a little bit of help. And if we were facing something that you could physically see, like you were bleeding out, you would attend to that wound, right? You wouldn't just let yourself bleed
Right.
out.
Yeah.
And so she's saying all these things, and I am like I'm trying really hard to not like just sob the whole time that she's talking because all of the ways that this fell into place at just the right time really felt like God was saying to me, like, it's okay, you're headed in the right direction, and I've got you. Because not only did she share with me all of the things that I was fearful about, she explained like how it was going to work. And she loves Jesus. And she shared with me like how she had just had a conversation at a women's retreat at her church like the weekend before about all of this. And it was so encouraging to know that like this was something that was scary for me. And yet God aligned the right people in my path to say, it's okay. And so now I'm really hopeful that this is going to be a journey that's going to make sense and we're going to come through it. And it's, and I trust him to make it through to the other side. And, you know, you just don't know until you're there and you're walking through it. But I'm just so grateful because, um, it's not anything I ever expected to have to go through in life. It's not something that I put on my bingo card for 2025, right?
No, but you went in prayer. Like you prayed, but then in faith, you sought out the actions to lead you to find what you needed in this season. So
right.
it's like the perfect combination: prayer, faith, action.
Yeah. And now hopefully healing, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I believe that. Well, we are running out of time on
I
our
know. That
Zoom
was quick.
call. Uh, I think just wrapping this up, it's so important to just remember that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
Such a cliche saying, but it's truly okay not to be okay. And we would be dismissed not to say, like, our podcast is Two Main Friends. Find your main friend, find your people that you can trust. And you said that earlier. You went to someone you could trust and said, can you pray? Find those people that you can trust to create the safe space for you that you can share these things that you're going through with.
And if you're looking for someone to be a listening ear, look out for people who may have walked through this before and have a little bit of experience. The person that I went to that I trusted has walked through a depression for a long, long time and was able to give me reassurance and advice and prayer and say, it's going to be okay. And sometimes we just need that person that's been through it. And if you don't have that, then find people that are around you that can just support you through it and be willing to just say, I'm like, if they ask, I'm really not okay. Because I think that if we are willing to say that more openly, it would help us be able to have these conversations more regularly without the fear of what's going to happen if I say this out loud. Because that was really hard for me. And so if that's where you're at, I totally understand. And maybe you don't even understand what it is that you're struggling with because it's hard to put into words sometimes. And so my heart's with you. And if you're sitting in a dark place, just know that it's not going to last forever. You can come through this on the other side. And if you're sitting there and all you can do today is sit, that's enough.
That's a wrap on this episode of Two Main Friends in a Podcast. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. You can also send us an email at twomainfriends@gmail.com. And as always, leave us a review wherever you're listening.